going to be on at the podium.
You could put your shoes on.
I don't. It'll be all right.
You know those jelly awesome insoles?
No, I should do that.
You should. I've got some of my boots right now, and they're fantastic. I'll go anywhere without insoles now.
That's a good call.
I ran around in flip-flops for like a decade. It's so bad for my feet. My knees are just the worst. Well, actually, they're not so bad now. They're loosening and actually wear my insoles. I don't realize how much direction my feet take. They don't flat. It's just when I stand, I let my arches. And I guess my knees they go in like this. I don't do that anymore now.
Checking in with Jim.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. So I just wanted to go over the format.
Okay.
So we have 12 questions. We're going to ask a question to one person and then throw a name from that person has 2 minutes to answer. Everyone else have 1 minute to respond about as they see fit. And so it's we have 12 questions and there's 6 of you. Everyone's going to have 2 questions. And then at the end, everyone has 1 minute to do a closing statement.
Okay. Sounds easy. Just got here, so.
Good luck, guys.
Great, thanks.
Still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you for running the camera. I appreciate it.
This is Friday night. Monday.
Monday night and Tuesday night is not too bad. There's another one tomorrow. If you can make it, great. If not, I understand.
Probably good. What is it? Which district?
It's county commission and state's attorney and sheriff.
Same.
Well, it's the county commission, so 3 districts for that. And this is state house. So yeah, blast. At least there's not school board again. Like 15 people on it.
I need one of those remote control rotating ones. Those are cool. Well, they have Bluetooth ones that you just turn on.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but you just click and
We had one that was supposed to be really nice, and it was like a live stream camera, so you plug it in and it does like, you know, you can use your phone to say, oh, well, I'm going to do a zoom in here, or I'm panning out here. Didn't work at all. Like, no, but there's.
I guess I just get it cut. Yeah, I'm gonna need some more for sure. Do you want some?
No, I got a bottle of that.
Okay, Those look like something to the city, they're looking for people.
They are definitely some of them are just in a thrift store. So that's where I buy all of my dress clothes is at thrift stores.
Actually, I got this on thrift store. It's a sneaky shirt, actually. It's,
Oh, it looks like it has some sort of doesn't.
but yeah, well, it's all attached to itself. So it can't come off. I can't, like, I hate that when your sweater like pulls off.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it's as warm as it looks either. I don't burst it. But I had to replace a bunch of my winter wardrobe this year because it's not as I was last year.
I
Last year, like, just out of the country for the winter. And pounds of water.
You know, I feel like I couldn't wear this coat last year. I couldn't wear that coat last year. I got this in Iowa. So I've had this for like 5 or 6 years. I could wear it.
More.
I only have the one suit, but all of my sport coats are thrift store coats, except like one. It's like $5. And if you buy a good quality one, yeah.
Maybe as a conversion, if you say last conflict
Yeah, I mean, like I look for like easily made stuff. I want to say I paid like $10.
Point out that all the candidates
Yeah.
and not a single female candidate would even
They were all over here.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If I could ask you to take your seats, we'll get started in just a second.
Should we center?
No, it's just going to be a long two. That's just going to when it's time for the questions, you can move it over that way.
Question's gonna be coming from the podium, right?
Yeah, but you can hear me. They don't even see me.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Heather Bull. I'm the Williston Area Chamber of Commerce President. Please bear with me as I do introductions tonight, as I've managed to come down with the latest cold. On behalf of our Government Affairs Committee with the Williston Area Chamber of Commerce, we welcome you to our candidate forum. Elected by us, our city, county, and state officials have tremendous jobs to do and are responsible to our businesses as well as our community. We offer these forums so that you can hear from the candidates running and make an informed decision on election day. We are proud to offer this forum in conjunction with the Williston Herald. Thank you to Cherry Creek Media for providing the live broadcast on 660 Keys News Radio, and thank you to the Williston Regional Economic Development Corporation for your sponsorship for this event. A couple quick things before I bring up tonight's moderator. As a quick reminder, the forums held this week are contested races in the general election on November 6th. Tonight, we will see candidates for the House of Representatives, which have 4 candidates for 2 seats, as well as for the Senate, that have 2 candidates for 1 seat in the North Dakota State Legislature. Tomorrow, we will see candidates for County Commission, State's Attorney, and Sheriffs as well. All races have 2 candidates for 1 seat. I do want to mention that the Williams County website, williamsnd.com, has more information for you, such as voting precincts, districts, and polling locations, as well as absentee ballot applications. Our moderator for this week's event is Jamie Kelly. Jamie has worked with the newspapers around the Midwest and on the East Coast for more than 15 years. Jamie is currently managing editor of the Williston Herald, a position in which he's held since August 2016. He lives in Williston with his wife, Emily Johnson. He will be joining us for both nights for the candidate forum. Please join me in welcoming Jamie.
Thank you, Heather, for the introduction. Thank you guys again. Thanks to the Williston Area Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event. It's It's wonderful to be here this evening. So this is the last call for questions. So if anyone has questions for the candidates, please you can hand them to Helen or put them in the box in the back. So without much more, we'll get started. We have 6 candidates here. The format tonight is going to be pretty straightforward. Every candidate is going to have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we'll ask questions. We'll draw a name at random to start out with, and then we'll go from there. The first person to be asked the question will have 2 minutes to respond. Everyone else will have 1 minute, and then we'll go down the line, 2 minutes with a 1-minute response. We have 12 questions this evening, so each candidate will have 2 chances to be the primary responder. And then when that's over, we have a 1-minute closing from each candidate. So, starting from the left here, we have Lindsay Walsh and Krista Parkinson running for state representative on the Democratic NPL ticket. And we have Melissa Johnson running for state senator on the Democratic NPL ticket. Senator Brad Beckedall is running for another term as state senator at the Republican ticket. David Richter and Representative Pat Edelstead are the 2 Republican candidates for state representative. So, I'm going to draw a name here to put the first person together. And the first name is David Richter. So, David will have the first question, then we'll go to Pat, and we'll go down the line that way, and then we'll continue that way. So, to David, the question is, in your opinion, what are the fundamental professional responsibilities of the individual holding the elected position of the legislature? And how might your approach differ from that of your opponents?
Were we gonna do introductions first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we are actually going to do introductions. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited to get to questions. So, we'll start here with Lindsay and we'll go there. And then for the candidates, Fran is timing. She will hold up a sign when you have 30 seconds remaining, and then hold up a sign when time is up. Lindsay?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Walsh. I just want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this and for inviting me here. This is really an awesome opportunity. I've lived in Williston for the last 6 years. Like many, I came here for a job, and I didn't expect to call Williston my home. After a year of living in a hotel and working crazy hours, I ended up purchasing a home here. And shortly thereafter, I started a business. And for the last 5 years, I've been owner-operator of my own carpet cleaning business. About a year ago, I decided that I was ready for a career change, and so I enrolled in the University of North Dakota School of Law, and I'm studying to become a lawyer. Right now, I split my time between Williston and Grand Forks, since I have to be in Grand Forks for school, but my house and my life is here in Williston. So I just got here from driving from Grand Forks from class that got out at noon, so I'm a little, ooh, I can't believe I'm here back home. So anyway, when I was in undergrad studying, the economic collapse happened, and I was studying international business and economics. So I went from having all the job prospects in the world to having basically none. And when I make decisions, it's absolutely about how this is going to affect myself and the other stakeholders long term. Because when I got to watch that economy just fall apart, it was a great time to be a student studying economics, but it was not a great time to be a young person hoping to start a career. So yeah, I generally tend to be pretty conservative when it comes to my decision making, because I want to make sure that what we're doing now isn't going to hurt us in the long run. I have a lot of interest in public service. It's one of the reasons I decided to go back to law school, because I thought I could make more of an impact as a lawyer. And if nothing else, I hope that everyone votes. It's absolutely most important that all of us just get out and vote. So thank you for having me.
Thank you to the Williston Area Chamber of Commerce, the Williston Regional Economic Development Corporation, Cherry Creek Radio, and the Williston Herald for this opportunity to speak with all of you today. My name is Krista Parkinson, and I first lived in Williston as a child in the early 80s when my parents came here in search of opportunity. My dad, a Montana farm kid, drove truck in the oil field. When his job disappeared with those of many others as the oil prices bottomed out, he moved his family to Western Washington, where I would grow up and attend school. So in 2004, when Don Marachek contacted me about coming to Williston to take over as managing editor of the Herald, I said, hey, I know that place. My husband Justin and I moved to Williston on a 2-year plan, but as many of you will understand, we fell in love with this community and decided to stay here to raise our kids. In addition to our 6 children, Justin and I were foster parents, giving a home and family to dozens of youth through emergency placement. That experience has colored my desire to serve more than anything else. I was active with the Williston JC as a community service organization that provided me with a wide breadth of opportunities. Through the JCs, I led on the local, state, and national level, going on to represent North Dakota as state president. I'm running for the House because I think it's time for some new energy. I think this community is getting younger. I respect the contributions of those who've come before, but with an average age in our community of less than 32, it's time our representatives better represented who we are. My top legislative priority is to speak up for Williston and Bismarck, taking every single opportunity to make sure decision makers know about our needs here. In addition, I'm dedicated to finding a school funding formula that works, funding for behavioral health care, something legislators have long promised North Dakotans but so far failed to deliver, and managing property taxes. Under the current leadership, North Dakota went from a budget surplus to tax increases in just a few years. Williston taxpayers should not be left holding the bag, and legislators should not be able to pass the buck to local leaders for increases in property taxes. Thank you.
Melissa?
Okay, they say when you step outside of your comfort zone, great things happen. So I'm expecting some big things after tonight. Thank you to the Chamber and Herald for hosting. I'm Melissa Johnson. I moved to Williston in 2002 for my first teaching job. Taught Rachel Richter over there. The first night here, my parents and I had dinner at the Burger Queen. That's how far back we go. The friendly waitress introduced us to Dennis Healy. You know Dennis Healy, we got the best, biggest small town welcome. I got to see Williston before the boom and the bustle of activity. Quiet, cozy, nice town. I met my husband Brandon, who was originally from here. We were married in 2004, and we have 3 daughters, Grace, Molly, and Sadie. Our family has seen and felt the benefits of the boom, along with the challenges. The jobs are plentiful, as are the children. Children are our greatest resource. We have to value them and their education. So my #1 priority will be to fight for public school funding. Another priority will be to work to expand behavioral health care services. Evidence-based, cost-effective programs dramatically improve people's lives and help relieve the pressure on their families. These programs would help keep those who struggle with mental illness or drug addiction out of our jails and in treatment. The bonus is saving taxpayer dollars. I'm young, I'm motivated, I truly have our community's best interests at heart. Not just for me or you, but for my children, your children, our grandchildren, the future of our community. Thank you.
Brad?
Thank you, Jamie. Good evening. My name is Brad Beckett. I'm a candidate for the District 1 Senate seat. I've had the honor and privilege to represent the residents of District 1 now for 4 years as your state senator. I'm a lifelong resident of Williston, and my family's been in the state here since it was actually before it was a state. I've had many opportunities to be involved in my community through local boards, state organizations, and national positions. I'm a charter member of the Gloria Dei Lutheran Church here in town and have served as its congregation president in the past. I currently serve in the North Dakota National Guard as a colonel and a past commander of the State Medical Detachment. I deployed to Iraq and serviced my country in 2005 and 2006. I'm fortunate to have grown up here with family in Williston and am blessed to still have family here. As you can see, God, country, and family are all priorities in my life. I'm retired from my private dental practice of 31 years and am busy with my city commission duties as well as legislative committees. I'm a good listener, a diligent worker, and I have the skills to make good decisions. I'm running for re-election to continue doing what I sought to do in my first election, to make good decisions for the state of North Dakota, which will ultimately be good for Williston and Northwest North Dakota as well. My priorities are city hub city funding, infrastructure, education and schools funding, workforce development, behavioral health, and a balanced state budget. I enjoy serving and hope to gain the trust of District 1 constituents to continue another 4-year term. I wish my running mates Pat and Dave well tonight and congratulate the other candidates on their endorsement and participation in our democratic process. And thanks to the Williston Area Chamber of Commerce and Williston Herald for sponsoring the event, and to the Williston Regional Economic Development Corporation and Keys Radio for broadcasting the event as well. Thank you.
David?
Thank you. I'm David Richter. My family and I moved to Williston in 1990. My professional career has been in education, first off at Williston State College, where I was there for 20 years as faculty in administration. And then recently, for the last 10 years, I've been the director of the Great Northwest Regional Education Cooperative, which is a consortium of 16 school districts in northwest North Dakota. I was eligible for early retirement in July, so I took advantage of that. My experience with legislation has revolved around working with local educational leaders and legislators on policies and funding concerning education. I have experience sharing ideas with legislators, working on bills, writing testimony, and preparing evidence. I've been involved in successful legislative efforts, which include low-interest construction loans for schools, the rapid enrollment grants that help our school districts, funding to build the Western Star Career and Tech Ed Center at Williston State College, and continued funding and more funding for current technical education. While working with and listening to legislators in the realm of education, I've gained knowledge of issues that are important to school districts, but are also extremely important to the city of Williston and the surrounding area. So I understand the funding mechanisms and the policy issues that face our area. During the last legislative session, both the House and the Senate passed a number of studies to look at efficiencies of government agencies and departments. The governor's office conducted similar studies. We're starting to see the results of those studies appear in the form of bills that will be presented at the legislative session in 19. We need to make sure that the legislation truly addresses the efficiencies, and agency budgets are reflective of efficiencies, not simply across the board cuts. I have a proven record of leadership and the ability to effectively communicate and compromise, to develop ideas and to work with various entities to get things accomplished. I understand that working together and collaborating are the keys to being efficient, effective, and to get things done. I will work for... Thank you.
Pat?
Thank you. Welcome and thank you for attending this evening, spending time with us, and a special thank you to the hosts and the individuals that are making this available for people that cannot be here and are unfortunately not being able to be here. My name is Patrick Adelstead. I've been in Williston since 1951, and I am currently representing you and the people of District 1 in the North Dakota Legislature. I love my job. I have no outside business interests that take time away from me, and that allows me to give you the best possible representation. I offer you 100% of my time and energy. Working with and for a host of community organizations, I've developed a strong understanding of District 1's educational, business, governmental, and community needs. I will do everything possible to ensure the interests of Western North Dakota are addressed during the 2019 session. We will introduce bills addressing needs that are critical for Western North Dakota, including tax distribution, school funding, hub city funding, and health care. The experience I bring to the table at this time, at this very important time for District 1, is invaluable. My work has already begun, working to build growing support for our legislation. We face major challenges that can be met with a vision and a plan. Our effort is to make Western North Dakota an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. As my wife said, Pat belongs in the house. My name is Patrick Adelstead. I love Western North Dakota, and I want to continue to represent you and the people of District 1. Thank you.
Great, thank you all again for being here, taking part in this forum. We'll start out with questions again. Start out with Dave. Dave? Yep. No, we had to write it down. I'm sorry. No, I will repeat that. Sorry about that. In your opinion, what are the fundamental professional responsibilities of an individual holding a position as a legislator? And how might your approach differ from that of your opponents? And David, you'll have 2 minutes.
I think in a representative government, you're elected to represent the people, And you should go down, a legislator will go down representing the area that he lives in and areas that are of importance to the constituents. But also, part of being that elected individual, the responsibility is that the citizenry trust you to make valued judgments and make judgments that they may not have input into. So we represent the people of the communities that elect us to go there, and we use our best judgment to make decisions that will benefit our area. But I also think as part of a larger structure, a state legislature, you have to also look at the whole state, and what sometimes occurs in other parts of the state can be beneficial and sometimes not, but you do what's the best for the most people at that time. Second part of the question
is how might your approach differ from other candidates and their opponents?
How would my approach differ? I think communication with everybody, whether it's on the, which side of the aisle they're on, which chamber they're on, with constituents from around the state. I think you need to listen and have conversations. I think the dialectic that you have helps you learn and become more able to express your opinion. If you don't know what the other side believes and how the other side is approaching it, it's very difficult to have an argument or have a discussion with the other side. When I use the word argument, I don't mean arguing like we typically think. I use the word argument as, an argument is a conversation, it's a discussion. And you have those discussions. And my time is up, so thank you.
Patrick, you have 1 minute.
As a legislator, I think your number one responsibility is to listen to your constituency. Keep in mind that you represent them, that you need to be extremely well informed what your needs are in the community and how you can get there. You need to ask a lot of questions. You need to answer your emails. You need to make phone calls. I think everybody in this entire panel wants what's best for North Dakota. The question is who can get it done. With experience and connections, I think I can do that.
All right. Lindsay, you have 1 minute.
I believe it's the job of the legislature, of a legislator, not just to do what's right based on their opinions, but based on what their constituents say. I think it's ultra important as someone representing a liberal ticket in a very conservative place that I be open-minded, because I know that we don't elect a lot of Democrats around here. So one thing Williston's taught me is how to be objective, and it's been something I've faced all the time, constantly having people say that my opinion might not be popular, and it's really made me think, I need to learn how to be more open-minded. So for me, it's all about open-mindedness, being able to communicate, and I will differ in just absolutely being nothing you expect, because I think maybe people think one thing about me, but I promise there's a lot more to me than what meets the eye.
Krista.
I think the main professional responsibility of the representative is to be accountable to the people. It's been about a decade since we had town halls here, and I think it's time that came back, that was a piece of what our legislators were doing. We need to be listening both in the House and in town. So we're making the tough choices that are actually representing what our people want. And I think it's really important that we're representing the interests of the West. There are lots of people representing the interests of the East. We need people who are standing up and saying, hey, what about us? What about us at every single turn? So I think what makes me differ is that I'm a bit of a nerd and a bit of a watchdog, and I'm always looking to be informed on all sides of the issue. And I will definitely bring that with me to Bismarck. Thanks.
Melissa?
All right, I believe that the professional responsibility is to not only know the needs of your community, but listen to them and bring them, represent those needs in Bismarck. As Krista said earlier, the average age of the community is less than 32. Lots of young families. I'm part of a young family. I feel like my needs are, our needs and our issues are similar to those living here, because we are a young family. And I agree, we have very different needs than the East. So we definitely want someone who can stand up and say, hello, hello, we need attention out West. But we have to work together as a state, being willing to see the whole picture as the whole state.
Okay, got it?
Thank you, Jamie. I think that the most important thing is we represent constituents, we represent you in the audience and everybody listening on the radio tonight. And ultimately, the seat that I've held for the last 4 years belongs to the public. It doesn't belong to me. It's just a place for me to be doing business on your behalf. In terms of style of activity in the legislature, I interact with others a lot. Relationships do matter. You get there by informing and listening, and you try to make the best decisions you can. But I'm kind of a worker in that aspect, because I hate making a decision without information, so I work and dig very deep to get the information I need to make the best decision. That would be my style. Thank you.
All right, our next question. Patrick will have 2 minutes and then we'll go to Ken. So the next question is, how do we attract workforce to the area? And what can a representative in the legislature do for the area to help attract workforce?
Thank you. Well, first thing we want to do is to make sure that the jobs that we have available are well publicized. I had the opportunity to be working for Job Service when the thing went bang in 2005 and that point on, and we were busy. We made an agreement with the oil companies, and we put out a national campaign, and we made people aware of the fact that jobs were available. The employers got together with us and they said, okay, these are the skills we need. This is what we can offer. And it's important that you share that information to them. Now, as a legislator, you need to make the, shall we say, the tax structure such that it is friendly to those people coming into the area, that it has to be reasonable, that the individual needs to be encouraged to come, that housing is available. We've offered incentives for the construction of housing. We've offered in efforts to make low-income housing available. We've set up, attempted to set up loan funds that would make it easier for an individual to get the money, the difference, the gap between what the bank could contribute and what you needed to buy that home, that we would have, the state could put up some money to help you with that gap funding. So we can actively encourage people to come. We can make this the best possible state. If you look at all of the reports and studies, North Dakota ranks 1 or 2 in the best place to live, a great place to raise a family. We can publicize all of the really great things that we have to offer.
Thank you. We'll move to Lindsay.
Okay, so one thing that is very important in how to attract the workforce to the area is making this a family-friendly community. I know that when I came out here, I came as a single woman, and everyone said I was crazy, and everyone had told me all these horror stories, and when I got here, I found out that that wasn't the case at all. This community is amazing, and everyone is so friendly and so kind, and just the other day, I was talking to one of my neighbors, and she said, she just moved here from somewhere in Montana, and she said, I don't know if I should walk, to the store without my husband. And I said, don't worry, Williston is not what you've heard. So making it family friendly, maintaining tax rates, we need to make sure that people know what to expect when it comes to their property taxes and income taxes. And I would love to say tons more, but I'm out of time.
Kristen?
There's a lot of great work already underway today to address the workforce shortage, both in the private sector and with public-private partnerships, and that should continue, of course. We can work together to provide more options for trade school, technical education, apprenticeships, and encourage students to look at these as viable options. In our changing workforce, a four-year degree just isn't for everyone, especially not anymore. This is also a place where quality of life comes in, like Lindsay mentioned. This is something the city of Williston and Brad's commission has worked very hard to put energy into, and that can expand with partnerships from the state level to continue bringing more young people in and attract more talent from outside of the state.
Melissa?
Okay, I think investing in infrastructure to draw people in, but infrastructure to me is not just roads and bridges. There's such a human aspect that we want to build up here. Dr. Heggie had a school board meeting was saying they invite doctors to come in, check out the facilities. They tour the schools and say, oh yeah, we'll see about that. You know, we need to invest in our schools and our communities, our clinics, so they can get in a timely manner if their child is sick or if they are sick. So I think investing in a wide range of infrastructure. The other thing I would think is connecting business and industry with high school students. Not all high school students will go out and get a 4-year degree. Let's talk to them about the industry that we have here and what they can be involved in with that.
All right. Brad?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think in terms of attracting workforce, we need to focus on homegrown talent, keeping the kids here educated with the right jobs we need, and letting them to stay here, return here. That's critical for us right now. Education and training. We need to break down some of the barriers in higher education in North Dakota and allow schools like Williston State College to flourish with their technical programs that we offer, which are in such high demand statewide. We also need to pursue quality of life improvements because that's what's going to bring people here and keep them, as we've heard from some of the other candidates. And housing and schools are important as well. So we have a lot of issues to do there. What role could we play? Obviously, this is not just a Williston issue, surprisingly to hear that. It's a statewide issue. Workforce development is everywhere. And so we need to work with our fellow legislators and bring the best possible policy through the legislature to address workforce issues.
Finishing up the tape.
In 1995, the state established a workforce council to look into how do we attract workforce into North Dakota. Things have gotten a little more difficult over the past few years with national unemployment going down to 3.0%, local unemployment is 2.6%. So we look at where's the workforce going to come from. I don't know that we can rely on bringing in people from out of state, but we can look at improving the workforce by reaching out to senior citizens, reaching out to people who have retired, looking more at job development at high school level and the junior college level. I think that the key to workforce is putting people into careers, not into jobs. And so if you're in a career, it's easier to go from one position to another position instead of just jumping job to job. I think the city's done a very nice job of getting things in order to bring people into the community.
Thank you. All right, for our next question, we'll start with Lindsay. So for Lindsay, for 2 minutes, how would you propose the legislature help diversify the economic base in our region?
That's an interesting question. I think that diversifying the economic base is really important, especially out in Williston, since so much of what's happened in this city has had to do with commodity-based economic activity. So if we're talking about the legislature, the whole entire state, not just our city, I think it's really important that we invest in higher education. We have some really stellar colleges and universities. We have great research institutions, and that's something that can bring people to this state and keep them in this state. And that's going to diversify our economic activity. It's not going to only rely on oil or agriculture, because as we know, those commodity prices can fluctuate. So that's something that I think the legislature can certainly do. We've seen cuts across the board in higher education, and from my own experience at the law school, we lost a lot of programs, and that made the law school in North Dakota not as competitive with other law schools. And in this state, we have a need for lawyers. So if we're only turning out 60 a year, I mean, that's not really serving the needs of our state. So I think that's one way that our legislature could definitely make a huge impact in our state. Additionally, I think when it comes to diversity, North Dakota does a really good job of promoting business interests, and I think that's something we really need to make sure we maintain. As a small business owner, I really benefited from that system. It didn't take me a lot to start and maintain my business. Of course, I dealt with the workforce issues out here we have in North Dakota, out here in Williston, but I would just make sure that we continue to encourage small business startups and growth, and I think our legislature could do a lot of work in that area. Thanks.
Kristen?
I think as we take care of what we have now, that opening up of resources will lead to more and more ingenuity in our community, and the diversification will take care of itself. I think as we support the local infrastructure, there'll be more jobs that come from that, so that people are more opened up. As more people come into the community, if you bring along your wife, she can start a business because there's resources available for that. And that has led to some amazing things downtown as we look at, different shops that are opened up as people come into town. So I think if we take care of the workforce shortage and the schools and those things, then the economic diversity will take care of itself.
Great. Melissa?
I couldn't agree more with Krista. I think as we work through hiring more and more people in our industry, the construction, gas plants, the oil industry, as we fill those, it will diversify, small business and technology and things that will come to our community will come as a part of this big industry that's drawing people in now.
We're already seeing results through our local small business development center and our economic development office in Williston. We're the busiest SBDC region in the whole state in terms of new entrepreneurship and development of businesses. And that's a result of our ag and our oil base at this point, but that will bring us dividends in the long run with these business startups. I think we also need to diversify the base. We need to continue to invest in transportation, water infrastructure at the state level, and communications assets are very important as well. Education facilities, again, Williston State College is going to be critical to that effort, particularly in the training and the certificate areas. And we do need to keep a business-friendly environment in terms of regulations in the state of North Dakota to bring new businesses in, so we're not so dependent on just one or two business sectors. And tax policy does make a difference, and I think it's been good tax policy so far.
David?
Yeah, we need to maintain our business-friendly environment that we have. I think there's some entities that have been doing a really nice job of promoting entrepreneurship and expanding the economy, not just in the Williston area, but throughout the state. Small business is a key to bringing more people in as well. I lost my train of thought. Apologize, I do that quite a bit. I think growing small businesses is an important aspect, and you need a business-friendly environment and able to do that. And so we need to keep working at the infrastructure that allows those businesses to start up. I agree with Senator Beckett-All, the tax structure and incentives that the state can offer to bring small businesses and other industry into the state would be very welcome.
Great. And Patrick?
Thank you. I think the number one thing we need to maintain is our business climate. We, in many polls nationally, are ranked number one in terms of business climate. So people are enthusiastic about coming here. We make it interesting and worthwhile. Training, I think we need to expand the junior college role. If you take a look at North Dakota, only about 20% of the jobs require a 4-year degree. So that 2-year junior college that can offer that training, we need to offer internship programs. Tax policy obviously is a good one. And then I think a strong thing is to support good, strong leadership such as the SBDC.
Excellent. This next question, we'll start with Krista. What would you have the legislature do to help encourage more affordable housing options in the area?
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't have a great answer for you, so there you go. So property tax relief is obviously important. as we look at what happened with the temporary buy down. We were promised tax relief and then it kind of fizzled off. Luckily here in Williston, it also associated at the same time with our property taxes, property values rising and lowering. So we didn't feel it as much here, but across the state, they really felt the property taxes going up in this last biennium. One way the legislature could give some relief would be to fulfill its promise on K-12 funding. Quite a number of years ago, the state promised to fund 70 to 80% of K-12 education, with local governments contributing 20 to 30%. During the current biennium, we saw budget cuts that were just not there. And so if we were able to get back to a place where we were funding 70 to 80% so that local entities didn't have to increase the property taxes as much, it would free up money to be used for more affordable housing and for people to be building houses and renting apartments for less and all of those things that would all come together.
All right, Melissa.
Okay, I need to learn more on this issue. I would assume there's opportunities for the legislature to do things with rates for loans, the first-time home buyers and things like that, that would encourage affordable housing. Grant opportunities for cities to look into to help with their housing. And I agree, keeping property taxes reasonable. When we have to bond and keep adding on to property taxes, it doesn't seem attractive to those that don't own a home if they're going to have their property taxes increase continually.
Right.
Well, we have a housing finance agency that offers housing incentive funds, which are tax credits for donated monies that go into multifamily construction projects statewide right now. And in return, then the developer promises to bring the rents down to an affordable rate and hold them there for 15 years. That's been wildly successful across the state. And Williston, we've taken great advantage of that as well. I had a bill in the last session that dealt with transitioning some of that funding from multifamily into single-family loans. Basically second loans in the process where someone who couldn't afford a down payment to get a single-family home could get a second loan that wouldn't count against their initial funding through the state and housing incentive fund. So that's where I think we could help out. And the other way to help out is obviously 1% state loan programs through infrastructure program funding that gives cities infrastructure and cheaper than we're doing it right now. So we have programs, they just need to be modified and probably expanded at this point. David.
Yeah, I think we need to continue the tax incentives, the low interest loans, and what Brad was just talking about, providing funding to cities, perhaps through the Hub City funding, so that cities can build the infrastructure, so that cost does not get added on to the cost of the lot. If the city can put in the streets, the sewer, and provide those structures, you can drop the price of housing simply because the state or the city is picking up the cost of that.
Great, thank you. Patrick.
I think number one is tax policy. The state of North Dakota has contributed about $1.3 billion over the last two years to bring down property tax. So tax policy is important. We're unique in North Dakota that we have the Bank of North Dakota, which has been fairly profitable, and thus we can use that money for loans and incentives. The Housing Finance Agency, as Brad mentioned, we worked with him on the incentives for the developer. And then schools is always an issue, and in the last legislative session, schools were held harmless. They did not take the cuts. They still had the full funding.
Great. And Lindsay.
I guess I would echo most of what's been said, but I think the problem goes beyond just our tax policies and how we can, like, in order to encourage development, we're gonna have to try to make Williston a more stable place. Because with our housing prices, in the time I've been here, they've gone up and they've gone down, and now they're coming back up again. And that's not really a place that anybody would want to put tons and tons of money into if they're not certain they're gonna get their return on investment. So I think it speaks to our economic policy and encouraging a diverse economy to make sure that this place that we all love and call home is gonna exist many, many years in the future. So that's all I got, thanks.
Great. And we'll start with Melissa for this next question. We've talked about education a number of times tonight. We're going to keep talking about it. Just So the question for Melissa is, what else can the legislature do to help fund K through 12 education?
Okay. When it comes to education, I would leave nothing off the table. The oil extraction tax was reduced, took effect January 2016. Maybe we raise that 0.5%, back and earmark that for education. Maybe we raise it more. The other, assuming that I had a note on, the legacy fund. We continue, it's growing, and it is a tricky subject, but I wouldn't leave it off the table. Maybe this biennium we say we will take a chunk out. It needs 2/3 of the legislative vote, so I would approach it. I'm not saying that jump at it and say maybe we do, with our dire situation here with our jam-packed schools, maybe we can make a case and say, hey, we could borrow, take it from the principal of the legacy fund, or earmark more of the interest. I would leave nothing off the table when it comes to education. I would fight for whatever we could get.
Brad?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. We do have a Common Schools Trust Fund, which was enabled when the state became active after the federal government empowered the state to exist. And that trust fund has between $3.5 billion to $4 billion in it right now. And interest money from that fund continues to go into paying the per pupil payments. Last session, we were coming up short from that fund to pay all the bills in education, when everybody else was taking 30% cuts. We had a measure on the ballot that the public approved in 2016 called Measure Number 2, which approved using foundation aid stabilization fund monies to buttress the fees going out to schools statewide. And we did use that. So as a result, none of the schools took a hit last session, and we hope to continue that and actually add on to it this next session.
Right. David?
Thank you. At the state level, the legislature thinks that equity means equal, and I don't think that equity means equal. When we look at how education is funded in North Dakota and how the formula works, there's an entire page. The funding formula itself is 12 pages long, and one entire page of that is deducts from income that comes locally. So when we hear we're funding schools at 80%, what's really happening is that state and local funding is at 80%. And so in Williston and other oil-producing counties, schools, funding that comes in out of oil taxes is considered to be state funding and is deducted from their general fund dollars that they get from the state. To me, that's not equity. The other aspect of it is the Common Schools Trust Fund takes revenues that are generated on recent oil production and considers that as principal. A possibility might be to look at that if that's not principal, that it's actually income because it's money generated recently.
Patrick?
Funding in education has always been a critical issue. For the most part, we've tended to look at it as a local issue. The state has gotten more actively involved. The federal government has backed away, and so the state and local areas have had to pick it up more. Oil tax is expected to make a major contribution. We were lucky in the last area when things went down. We made reform legislation. We still picked up $1.3 billion in oil tax revenue, which helped some of that issue. The legacy fund is not a bad idea. There are going to be a lot of hands reaching for funds in that area, but legacy fund is a good issue. The Common Schools Trust Fund with a lot of money in it, but that will require a constitutional amendment to take some of that money and use it, other than the interest.
Lindsay?
I think this is a really fascinating and exciting topic because we can use a lot of creativity to solve this problem. And one thing that happened at the Supreme Court level is that it's now okay for states to take sales tax from online sales. And the North Dakota legislature was proactive in that and made it law before it was even official that we could take, they said if it becomes allowed, then we can take online sales tax. And one thing that I think we could do is consider using online sales tax to fund our schools. The projections is that it would only be $25 to $50 million, but that's a $25 to $50 million amount that we don't already have. Our state legislature made it so we can't use sales tax because it was deemed unfair that rural communities were paying sales tax in city communities. But this is a way that maybe we could bridge the gap because online sales will come right from where you're sitting and making your purchase. So just some ideas like that. I think we could throw some creativity and maybe try some new ideas.
And Kristen?
I think what the state could do is make schools a bigger priority. It's great to hold schools harmless in the budget, but costs are going up every year. So holding harmless and keeping a flat budget is not gonna do it. We need to, throughout this campaign, we have knocked doors and attended community meetings, and voters have shared so many ideas with us about how to fund schools. People have ideas. People need to come to the table and share those ideas and figure out what the best thing is to move our schools forward. We also have to correct that Hub City funding problem. The fact that the school district is having to lose 75% of what they get in Hub City funding the next year in their state funding, that just doesn't work. As Dave mentioned, that's not equitable. So we need to correct that as we move forward.
Excellent. For our next question, we'll start out with Brad. This one's also education related in a little bit of a different way. Is should the state help pay for new school facilities, especially in areas that have experienced tremendous growth?
That's a really great question, and one that we've struggled with for a long time. The state legislature has in the past taken the tack that the state will pay for the majority of costs of educating the children in terms of the operations costs, which the state now picks up about 72% of those costs on an annual basis per child. But the schools, districts themselves, local population will have to build schools, and that's just been the attitude. So we're changing that gradually down there, and I think we can change that by working with the Bank of North Dakota, first of all on low interest infrastructure funding for the bond issues that go out there and save the schools money long term in doing that. And secondly, I'd like to pursue seeking monies for grants. I think if the local population is going to put money on property tax to do the school structures, then I think the state could help out with a grant that matches or exceeds that as well. And I think we need to work diligently to make that happen. There are oil and gas revenues that could be used for that. Legacy fund interest could be used for that. There's a lot of different areas that could be looked at to help that out. But my tact would be, let's look at making something where the grants come out to the local areas as well. We need to do more, particularly for the fast-growing areas. And don't forget, most schools have a 40 or 50-year life. There's a lot of other schools out there in non-growing school districts that have school needs as well.
David?
I think one of the major problems that building buildings for schools comes into is that the legislature doesn't consider school buildings infrastructure. If we could somehow get an attitude change that schools are infrastructure, buildings are infrastructure, it opens up a whole new bucket of funding that could be possible to use to build those. Unfortunately, right now, they look at building buildings as a responsibility of a local school district. And anything that alters that they view as messing with the formula. And most legislators around the state are very reluctant to do anything that has to deal with changing the formula or looking at the formula in a different light. 1 cent sales tax could be brought back up. There are other ways to fund schools that the local community could look at using, but we would need some legislative changes to allow it.
Patrick?
I like the idea of throwing out ideas of what might be done. A lot of great minds out there with a lot of unique situations. I think we need to talk more about that. The Bank of North Dakota with loans, we've done that now the last couple sessions. We put a lot of money out there for schools to borrow, which would help take some of the pressure off. The grant's not a bad idea. We've also funded rapid enrollment monies to those school districts that are experiencing rapid growth. The sales tax bill will be reintroduced now in the start of the next session to see if we can make that fly. So we're open to all kinds of new ideas, and I think even the East is willing to look towards the West. But the East has some problems with that area too, especially West Fargo is a good example.
Lindsay?
I mean, short answer, yes. I definitely think that the state should help pay for new school facilities. I mean, when we talk about something like that, we're talking about all of our future. I mean, our kids are our future. And North Dakota, I mean, this is a great state. There's a lot of really intelligent people here, and we should be wanting to invest in our future, because the kids are what's gonna be one day the adults that make this place run. So if we give them the tools and the facilities they need to succeed, it's only gonna help us succeed. Yeah, thanks.
Krista?
I think some great things have been said here. What Brad mentioned about the loans and grants is an awesome thing. Working with the Bank of North Dakota, that awesome NPL institution, to move forward more partnerships, could make a huge difference in helping to fund schools. We also need to look at things like partnerships, like Watford City did. The way they built their new high school, they worked together with the city. The school owns 1 foot beyond the school, and everything else there belongs to the city. Looking at partnerships like that is going to be a way for communities to think outside the box and be creative to build more schools. But of course, the state is going to be a huge part of that.
And Melissa?
All right, I agree that the state should be a part of building schools, and I think we do need to mess with the formula and maybe bring more local control. Change that at the state level, and then like bringing back the sales tax, working with the city. When we met with Joanna Baltus, the school board president, she mentioned the city is really willing to work with the school district and wants to help. So these partnerships would be great if we can get some local control of funding.
Right, and that takes us through 6 questions, so we're halfway through. So we'll start again, David. So the question, or the next question is, do you feel the current distribution of the gross production tax is fair? And how would you suggest reallocating it if it isn't?
I do not think that the current distribution is fair. There is a bill that's going to be introduced. It's called Operation Prairie Dog. It looks at changing the distribution of the funding formula, of the oil funds, bringing more money into hub cities, bringing more money into hub city schools. And Williston is considered a hub city school. One of the things that I really like about the new proposal that's out there is it looks at the infrastructure of a school district as being a separate thing than the general fund. So right now, when that money comes into a school district, and for every $1 million Williston gets, they subtract $750,000 off of next year's general fund. And that really hampers the school district, especially if your funding for next year is lower than your funding was this year. You could actually end up having to pay more money back than you actually got the previous year, because education funding is 1 year behind. It's not equal, it's 1 year behind. So I think the production tax could be distributed, more could be spent into this area. I think the legislation that's going to be proposed addresses that and looks at how we can use that funding for more infrastructure in Western North Dakota.
Great, thank you. On to Patrick.
I think the tax needs to be done differently. I think we're trapped in a situation where we were part of the lawsuit to establish equity because we were a property poor district. And when we made certain deals in that situation, we kind of pushed ourselves into a corner. So that definitely needs to change. The Western area legislators have gotten together and put together a coalition sponsoring legislation that Dave talked about in there, that we do guarantee stability as far as hub city funding, hub city school funding, and I think that's important. So there are efforts being made already to try and stabilize so that we don't have to fight every 2 years tooth and nail to survive. And I think as the East accepts that idea, then it'll be easier to change the funding formulas.
All right, Lindsay.
I also agree that it's not a fair distribution currently. One thing that I noticed is when I'm on the east side of the state, people always say things about Williston, and it seems like they don't think we're a part of North Dakota, and it never has made any sense to me because we're a huge part of North Dakota. So I wonder if it's a general idea that maybe we shouldn't get as much, or what that is that's causing this sort of idea that we don't need as much, but our needs out here only get stronger and only get greater. Our infrastructure needs are a lot greater than I think most people on the east side of the state realize. So I would hope that we revisit this and running out of time.
Krista?
Last weekend I was in Fargo for a dinner, and a candidate there came up to me and was asking me, what's so important about your roads over there that they're more important than my road over here? And I think what doesn't get seen and what really needs to be communicated better is that the bulk of what's going into the budget is coming from here. The largest single revenue source is oil. And so if we continue to just look at it as a revenue source and don't take care of the oil producing communities first, it's going to continue to be their money that they're sharing with us instead of the other way around. And so the structure needs to be changed. It needs to look more toward taking care of the oil producing communities so that we're not constantly having that fight.
Melissa?
I couldn't agree more. She took my answer. I think, I know, right? I really think the oil industry is what's driving our state right now, and we need to take care of those communities that are driving the oil industry. And then our revenues are being spread across the state. So let's make sure that our needs are met, our infrastructures, we're building up our infrastructure. It'll help the state overall. I think the East needs to realize that.
And Brad?
The biggest single change that made the distribution a little more fair, I think, happened in the 2013 session. It was called Hub City Funding Legislation. It was passed then. From 2007 to 2013, Williston got an average of $1.3 million per year in gross production tax distribution. After Hub Cities passed in 2013, we've now been averaging $26.3 million a year in gross production tax funding for the city. Is it enough? If we get it long term. And the new legislation you'll see coming in the next session will take away the 2-year sunsets that are currently on that legislation. Hopefully we don't have to go in and fight for that anymore. We will be funded at or above the levels we're at currently, and that's a change to the distribution I think will be good for Williston.
Okay, and for the next question, this starts with Patrick. Do you think the gender and age breakdown of the legislature and of District 1's representatives are representative of the community, and does that have an impact on the way the community is served?
Well, I think most legislators have the state of North Dakota's interest and their district unit at their heart. We're not concerned about just our own egos. So I'm not so sure that gender and age has anything to do with it. I think people are very vocal now. They communicate very well. We get 20, 30, 40 emails a day from people. So we have a flavor of what the community is looking for. In my case, I'm married. My wife is not afraid to share her perspective as to what should be done. So I do have that. I have a lot of friends and a lot of teachers that I work with, and they're very vocal in what they think is necessary. So I think our primary focus should be not age, not gender, but who best represents us as well as the state of North Dakota.
All right. Move on to Lindsay.
As a 31-year-old woman, I would have to say that I don't really think my age group or my gender is adequately represented in our state's legislature. I mean, it's no secret that it's a predominantly older, white, male-dominated legislature. And I think why it's important that we have more diversity is that more diversity brings with it more ideas and more creativity and different backgrounds and different perspectives. it's a unique perspective that we all bring to the table, but once we can talk about different ideas and different viewpoints, that's where the creativity and that's where the ideas are gonna come from that are gonna keep our future happening. I mean, it makes me really excited to get to live in a place like Williston, but it also makes me really nervous that maybe I won't be able to live here forever because I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but I wanna make sure that our legislature is taking care that we will survive for the long term. Just not that long ago, this community had a totally different makeup, so I wanna make sure we stick it out for the long haul.
Krista?
Respectfully, Representative Hattelstead, gender and age has everything to do with it. This community is not made up of older white men. This community is 18% people of color. This community is 31.7 years old. This community is nearly half women. The median age of our legislature is 60.5. That is not representative of our community. That is not representative of who we are. So we need to change that. It's, there are 58% women running across the state for a reason. We're not represented, and it's time to do something about it.
Melissa?
I agree. The legislature doesn't represent the people of North Dakota, age or gender-wise. I think a healthy mix of younger people and of more women and more minorities would bring a really awesome aspect to the legislature. And like Krista said, 58% of the candidates running in North Dakota are women, and I think this is a sign that we do want to see change in the makeup of the legislature.
All right, Brad? I've served on many boards locally and nationally, and I've always told people that the best boards I serve on have a mix of genders. There's a different perspective and a different thinking process that goes on between the males and females. I believe there's books written about it, I haven't read them all. But I think it's important that we have that. But I also think it's important that ultimately the decision is the public's. They're the ones voting in these issues and voting on us as candidates, and they need to make the decision that they can based on the qualifications, the work effort, and what they see for the candidates. And I trust whatever decision that the public makes to be the best. David?
I agree with Brad. I've sat on quite a number of state committees, and on those state committees, they've always been mixed, male, female. As a matter of fact, I've been on committees where I was the only male representing the state. I think that diversity of ideas and the diversity of thought is a very important part of a democracy and of representative government. And I don't know that we need to look at gender, age, religion, ethnicity, any of that as the primary factor on why we choose the people that we choose to represent us in government. I think it's the ideas and how they're going to represent you and listen to you and do the things that that community is looking for that's much more important.
All right. So for this question, we'll start back over on this side. Lindsay, what responsibility does the state have to fund addiction and mental health services, especially in areas where that's underserved?
This is an interesting question for me to be asked because I am a sober alcoholic and I've been sober for 15 years. I graduated from a high school called Sobriety High, so that's what my diploma says, Sobriety High School. So addiction and mental health is something near and dear to my heart because it's based on my personal experience. I was fortunate to grow up in an area where a lot of energy and effort and funding went into mental health and addiction treatment, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here today. And I am a successful person, and I've been sober since I was 16 years old. I mean, it sounds absolutely strange, but it's my reality. So I think that one thing that's really important is if we want our community to be successful and to thrive and to succeed, we need to invest a little bit in our community. And when it comes to mental health and addiction issues, that's something that is an issue here in District 1. I mean, you only have to open the newspaper one day to read about a story of a drug addiction, of an overdose, or of drug deals. These things are happening in our community, and we don't have a residential treatment facility here. I mean, if someone needs help, they're gonna have to go somewhere else. So I think it's really important that our state consider putting more money behind something like that, because that's what's gonna get our people able to be productive again and to bring, to keep work happening and to keep these communities growing and to keep everything just continuing to grow. I'm just sort of amazed that I got asked that question, but I know that Governor Burgum has made a point of trying to take away the stigma of addiction, and that's why I'm very open about my sobriety. I just want people to know that there shouldn't be a stigma attached to it, and our state should try to do more to help with mental health and addiction issues. And thank you.
Kristen?
Last week, Melissa and I sat down with Lutheran Social Services and had this great conversation about partnerships that are happening across the state. Ways that private organizations and nonprofits are partnering with local entities, with the state, to make a difference in communities and to make services available. We need to be able to expand those programs so that they can work more here in Williston, so they can work with our schools, so that they can work with more individuals. The state has a responsibility to provide whatever they can, whatever resources they have available to them to help local communities to expand their behavioral health, which is a massive issue here in Williston, across Western North Dakota, and is really an issue across the entire state. So obviously, there has been a little bit of a failure on that point that we can build on. It's a great opportunity.
Melissa?
Our meeting with Lutheran Social Services was incredible. It was really hopeful. I left feeling like they really do want to help across the state, and it was just awesome. I think the state should invest in behavioral health care services. In the end, it's going to save us money. That's what everyone seems to be worried about, is money. If you help keep those that are struggling with mental health or drug addiction in treatment, they won't be in our jails, and they will be productive members. We can hope and help them get to be productive members of our community. I wanted to share this. Frederick Douglass says, "It is easier to build strong children," he said it, "it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." If we invest in our children now, they will have the tools they need when they come across drugs and mental illness. I feel like this would be a huge step if we invest in the youth.
Brad?
Thank you. One of the things that happened in the last legislative session is, for the last two sessions, we've had a special committee in the interim that deals with this issue, and they've come with a justice reinvented priority. And there was $7 million of correction budget that was reallocated to addiction treatment. Everybody is now finally realizing that it's cheaper and better for society to treat addiction than it is put people in prisons. And it's taken us a long way to get there. So the session that we were just in, and the next session, you will see a focus on treatment, not incarceration, and it's a high priority with the governor. This is a bad statistic, but 100% of the women incarcerated in the women's prison are addiction people. That's why they're there. That doesn't need to happen anymore. So I support behavioral health and always have.
Okay. David?
Well, I also support the state funding it. In this biennium, the state's budget is about $3.9 billion of the state's budget is to the Human Services Department. One of the areas that we're missing in Western North Dakota is we have shortages of providers and shortages of service areas. And I think the state can address that, not necessarily a legislative responsibility, but with the Human Services Center in general, can look at addressing those shortages in this part of the state. And I do agree with the way things are taken. The federal government has taken a stance that they're going to work on prevention instead of cure. They're going to put more emphasis on prevention, and the state is now looking at prevention. There is, in Century Code and in rules in education, all school districts in the state of North Dakota have a number of mandates that they're supposed to provide behavioral health, education, and services in the schools. But we need to provide the people to provide those services in order for them to be carried out in the schools.
And Patrick?
Thank you. I've had the advantage of working with both Northwest Human Service Center and Williams County Social Service. They are diligently working to bring qualified psychiatrists, psychologists, to our community. There are a very limited number in the state of North Dakota, none of which want to move this way. So they've done everything electronically that they can possibly do, telemedicine, for example, to try and get services to those people in need. There is no question we need more. We need to graduate more people. And I think both organizations and the people that run and work in those organizations have dedicated themselves to making our community a safer and better place. And if we can prevent the breaking of an individual, great. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you all. We'll start with Krista for the next question. Should the state be using interest from the legacy fund to pay for infrastructure projects? And if it should, how should that be distributed?
Well, the short answer is yes. That money is there for building the future of our state, and so it should be used that way. Like Pat said earlier, there are going to be a lot of hands out looking for money from that funding. So for me to say, oh, it should be used X, Y, Z right now without having sat down and looked at all of the proposals would be irresponsible. But the money definitely needs to be utilized in every way. Schools need to be looked at as infrastructure, like Dave said earlier, and we need to look at building up our state and using that money in responsible ways, especially using that interest money moving forward to build long-term projects, infrastructure projects, school buildings, those sorts of things.
Okay. And Melissa?
Yes, I agree, the interest should be spent, and I would love to be a part of deciding how that would be divvied out. I think having someone from the West speak up about their needs would be awesome, and sharing that with the legislature to get some of that money this way would be great.
Brad?
Thank you. I was one of the original members of the committee for Measure 1 that in the first attempt to pass the legacy fund failed. And we went back to the public and asked in meetings throughout the state, what did we do wrong and what would you like to see in this measure? And the public at that time said, we want to see two things. A lower amount of money going into the legacy fund, and we want a present day benefit as well as a future benefit. So what they wanted was, they wanted some of that money coming in for interest. So we set the fund up so that in 2017, after 6 years of interest flowed in from 2011, after 2017, the money intentionally went to the general fund to be used as a priority for infrastructure or whatever else the state deemed necessary at the time. That's what was the beauty of that measure when we first started. So to date, it will be about $200 to $400 million this biennium in that interest-bearing account in the general fund. $200 million is going to go to the general fund to plug some budget gaps from last time. I'm hoping the other $200 million can go to infrastructure.
David?
Thank you. I'm not going to address the interest because I think Brad just did a nice job on that. There was a proposal that was put forth, we'll see if it ends up coming out in legislation, where the legacy fund is invested it's invested in money generating bonds. And the proposal was thought, why can't that legacy fund be invested in municipalities? A municipality in North Dakota could have access to the principal in the legacy fund, pay a low rate of interest back on that funding, and use that funding to build roads, bridges. It was described, a bridge that's built for 100 years is a legacy. A highway that's built and is going to last for 50 years is a legacy. That funding can go into municipalities and townships from the principal, so you're not really reducing the principal. All you're simply doing is you're borrowing that principal or investing that principal in North Dakota municipalities and townships instead of in national investments.
Patrick?
As we mentioned once before, the legacy fund is going to have a lot of hands reaching to grab. Currently, the $200 million or so in interest goes into the general fund, and that goes through the budgetary process. Some of it will end up in infrastructure. Some of it will go into the other needs that the state meets. Should we take the legacy fund and borrow, I think, from it and loan it to communities? I think yes. So the Legacy Fund has a lot of opportunities for Western North Dakota. And I think our Western Coalition will take every opportunity to develop it.
Lindsay?
Short answer, yes, just like everyone else has said. And when we talk about how to split that up, I think it's important that we look to priorities, and we have to prioritize what places and what projects are most important. And one thing that I want to make sure is considered when we're talking about prioritizing is when we talk about Western North Dakota, we need to talk about how investing in our infrastructure out here gives a direct effect to the money that's going to come back into the state. Because when we're investing in our roads and our infrastructure, that's helping our industries to be able to produce more, which is going to bring more back to the state's legislature. So I certainly hope that when we talk about these things, we talk about how we're going to get the best return on investment and how we're going to adequately provide for the needs that we have.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Melissa. Do you support a recent proposal that would move control of social services away from the county to take a more regional approach?
To be honest, I didn't know that. More regional approach. I would think that it would be important for the cities, the communities, that it would not be a good idea to go regional, that your needs would be different than your whole region. So I would think no, that the counties should have more say in where their funds are going.
Right?
I wish you'd asked me this question for the 2 minutes, because it was my bill last session, I actually empowered this. It was Senate Bill 2206. And what happened was, the funding for administration, which is the employees at the local level that administer social service programs, used to be paid by the state. It was taken away many years ago. This reinstituted it to state funding. They're still county employees. They will still be in the county offices administering the services. The proposal that you saw has actually been worked on by a coalition of not just state human services people, but also by the Association of Counties has been intimately involved in that. And in fact, it was my insistence that the counties are involved in that process, because we need to keep that local. I think you'll see something quite different than what's been published in terms of the discussion, because I think there's a lot of miscommunication out there at this point. But my hope is it stays local, and I think it will.
Okay. David?
I think the answer to that question is in the details of how it all gets laid out. If it stays local and there's administrative functions and telemed functions that get moved out, it's a lot different than if the actual service providers are no longer available in the region. You can do things at a distance, but the local, putting a human face or being there and a personal touch is something that needs to remain. And that's all.
Patrick?
The idea behind the legislation was that the state would pick up administrative functions and some of the programs that they were not now funding, but that the control would remain with the county. It would save the taxpayer 20 mills on their property tax bill. Now, if we look in the paper, and again, the devil is in the details, but it appears as though what the legislature had intended and what the bureaucracy intends, not necessarily the same thing. So I think there will be a dogfight in the 2019 session. We want local control. We want state involved because they have deeper pockets, and we obviously have a health issue. So we need the state involved, but things get handled probably better at the local.
All right. Lindsay?
This is an issue that I haven't heard as much debate about as other issues. So I certainly understand the need for, or the interest in, consolidating services at the state level. Hattlestad just said it best, that it's going to save a lot of money. And so that would be my idea for why people would want to have that. So as long as we can keep a local voice in something like that, I think that would be most important, because any local group is gonna know, what the needs of their community are better than the whole state. So as long as we make sure to keep local voices at the forefront of any change like that, and I apologize, I should have said Representative Halstad, I just said your last name. It's something we do in law school sometimes. I apologize for that, but yeah, I think that's all I got.
All right. Kristen?
So my husband and I used to be foster parents, and I can't even imagine the foster parenting program being maintained at a larger scale. That needs to happen locally. Social service programs need to stay local. But of course, being open to that state funding and being able to move the funding state instead of local makes a huge difference. So I think the intent of the legislation, I absolutely support. Obviously, we need to see how it's come out as the government employees have had their fingers in it. But maintaining that local control and keeping, travel to a minimum and keeping resources local and making the decisions local are all super important things.
All right. And this will be our evening's last question. We've selected a question from the audience. There are a number of measures, initiated measures on the November ballot. Among them is one that would create an ethics commission and stronger ethics rules, measure 1 on this ballot. Do you support the measure, and can you explain your stance on that? And we'll start with Brad for 2 minutes.
Yeah, I have a piece of paper here. Thank you for the question. Actually, the way it's proposed, I don't support the measure the way it's proposed, because one of the things that it does, we have inalienable rights written in our Constitution in North Dakota, much like the federal government. The measure is written so that anything that the commission wants to do, and as it's empowered to, supersedes anything constitutionally we have for our protections. I don't know why it was written that way. It would not be the way that I would have done it, but it's written that way. And as long as that provision's in there, I'm not in support of the measure as it is. I do want to tell about what we did in the last session. We did change campaign disclosure requirements, and I'll tell you what some things that Senate Bill 2343 did, and it did pass the session. It prohibited the use of campaign contributions for personal benefit, which was not in statute before that. And it made the requirements for reporting contributions much stricter and much quicker and more transparent. And I think those were all good things. So I think that last session we took a step towards this area, maybe not be as far as what some of the people that the measure have in mind. It does worry me to some degree too that there is so much outside the state support for this ethics commission. South Dakota went through this about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and ended up that their state Supreme Court and their governor had to deal with that issue, and it didn't go down well at that stage. And again, it was an outside the state funded measure. So hopefully the public looks at it and understands that they'll be giving up some rights in this process if they approve that measure, and make the best decision.
All right. David?
I oppose to measure 1. I think what it does is it only provides 2 additional pieces to it that are not already in statute. Both of those 2 pieces I think are very flawed. One is it creates the commission, which it doesn't give any indication of who's the oversight of that commission, what the responsibilities of that commission are, how long they serve. And then the second one is it creates a hotline where anybody, anywhere can make a phone call to this commission and lodge an ethics complaint against anybody. So what ends up happening is that individuals can be talking on the street, and some anonymous individual is able to call the commission and lodge a complaint that they violated ethics in some way, shape, or form. And it's an anonymous call. The accuser never has to come forward to know who's accusing them. And
All right, Patrick?
Thank you. I'm opposed to measure 1. We have not in the past had a problem. That I think is a credit to the legislators that have served the state of North Dakota. Every year before the session starts, we sit down with our legal people and go through what the ethical behavior of a legislator is so we are aware of what's happened or what could happen. And so we've been very careful with that. If we think that there is a problem, and we addressed a couple of them, we thought maybe potentially it could become a problem. But I think we need to emphasize we have not had that problem, that our legislators have behaved ethically without having all of these strict rules and people looking over your corner. We have good people that represent us. I think it should stay that way.
Lindsay?
In principle, I think this was a great idea, having more oversight over ethics. I am not the biggest fan of the fact that we aren't taking it through the legislative process to make edits and to have debates on it and to go through and actually pick the language that's gonna dictate how this is going to work in reality. I think that it's maybe a little optimistic to say that the people in power are able to adequately police themselves. So from that standpoint, I definitely think that there is work that can be done on this. I would be more interested that we would go through the typical legislative process, but also I think it's a really great way for underserved voices to have a voice by bringing this ballot measure. So I know that's kind of a lot of jumping around of my views on it, but I'm definitely torn because I see the need, but I'm also concerned about some of it.
Krista?
There are only 6 states which currently do not have an independent ethics commission. While I'm undecided on the wording of this particular measure, I do see it's on the ballot because of the failure of the legislature to act. The House addressed this twice and failed to pass an ethics commission, so the people decided to take it upon themselves. And maybe if the House had done it in a way that took care of the problem and policed themselves, then the people wouldn't have come up and done that. I think the people want transparency. They want to know what their elected officials are doing. And so that's the reason they put this ethics commission idea out there. Whether the people will support it is a completely different issue, and I absolutely support whatever the vote is.
All right. And Melissa?
I agree. The ideas in Measure 1 are good. There's things in there about banning foreign money, restricting lobbyists. So the idea is there, but I agree. There needs to be specifics, things we don't know. What happens when they do find trouble? There's things that need to be laid out and worked through.
Okay, and that is our final question of the evening. I will not create closing statements. So we'll start on the other end this time. We'll start with Patrick, and we'll go down this way. And everyone will have 1 minute to give a closing statement, sort of a summary of your...
Okay, thank you. We face major challenges. I don't think anybody would disagree. I think these challenges can be met with a vision and a plan. Working with a coalition of Western legislators, I think we can present and successfully argue for these challenges to be met. I think a prime example in the previous session was the surge bill. Over $1 billion came back to Western North Dakota. So I look forward to dealing with the challenges. I find it interesting and challenging and thrilling that the people of North Dakota will respond and will let us know what they think needs to be done.
All right. David?
First, I want to thank the Williston Regional Economic Development, Keys Radio, and Wilson Chamber for putting on this event. If elected, I will work with the Western Coalition of representatives and other representatives around the state in both chambers and on both sides of the aisle. I will work for equity and adequacy of state funding for education, to continuation and permanence of hub city funding, higher efficiencies in state government, and I will advocate for the public policies that improve the well-being of Western North Dakota. Thank you.
Brad?
Well, I was remiss when my opening remarks, and I apologize for that, but I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, obviously, and the radio audience as well, but for those that couldn't. I think this is democracy at its finest. I'm just very honored to be here at this table with all the candidates. I look forward to the election, hope for the support. I've enjoyed my 4 years. I think I have great relationships down there, and I've told you before that I'll work hard tirelessly to make things well for us here. And good decisions come with good information. I appreciate the public's interaction. Get to me whenever you can. I'm always going to be receptive. As I said, I'm a good listener. And whatever decisions the public makes, judging by what I see here tonight, you'll have good representation. Thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you. I want to thank all of our hosts tonight, and thank you all for coming. I appreciate that you want to be informed voters. My biggest priority, like I said, will be to fight for public school funding. I truly believe children are our greatest resource, and I will fight for them on all aspects. And I appreciate the democratic process. I think it's awesome that you have a choice in Williston. It doesn't always happen. So thank you.
Krista?
In closing, thank you everyone for coming out today. Thanks to the host for this opportunity. I just want to say two words that are really important to me: servant leadership, and that's why I'm here. As a candidate, I'm endorsed by the AFL-CIO and labor unions because I care about the working people of this state and I want to work for them. Williston's getting younger. We need people in these offices that understand the needs of the people they represent. I have a young family, so understanding young families is who I am and what I do. And you know what? It's time for a woman to serve in this position. Williston has never been represented by a woman. It's 2018. That's ridiculous. It's time for a change. Thank you all. I look forward to serving you and would appreciate your vote.
All right. And Lindsay?
I also want to say thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. I've been really nervous about this, and it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. And I just want to say that when I came to Williston, I never expected that this place would become my home. But Williston gave me the chance to have a life, and to buy a home, and to start a business, and to put some roots down somewhere. And I want to make sure that that is possible for people that come after me. I want to give Williston my energy and enthusiasm. I want to fight for our city and our state, and I want to make sure that that we get everything that we need. And I will make sure to learn and to listen and to do everything that I can to represent Williston and our values. I'm just really grateful for this opportunity to be here tonight. And I really do hope that everyone comes out to the polls and votes.
All right, I'll echo that. I really do hope that we have a good turnout at the voting in November. I wanted to thank the candidates again for coming out and sharing their thoughts with us. I wanted to thank all the audience for coming out, the audience on Keys, and also on the Williston Herald site for watching this and participating. I'd like to remind everyone that tomorrow night we have the county candidates forum. That will be county commissioners for districts 1, 3, and 5, the state's attorney's office, and the Williams County Sheriff's race. All of those will be up. So that again starts at 6 o'clock. It's in this room as well. So thank you guys all for coming, and have an excellent day.
Oh, sorry, were you gonna?
Good job.
Thank you.
You're good up there.
Thank you.
Mine's forgetting the beginning.
Yeah, well.
I appreciate it.